record to the computer. All right, welcome. Here. All right, so you are ready? We are set. I'll put the front lights down. See how this works. And we are timing these are 30 minutes, right, Chris?
Yep.
Okay, we keep time, let them know, and then we'll transition.
I'll let you know 5 minutes. Thank you. Ready?
So make sure you speak up and go right ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeb Bowen. I'm the archaeologist at the Clark May Museum in Circleville, Ohio. And with me is Richard McClish. He's the geologist at the Clark May Museum. And today we're going to be briefly discussing Richard F. McClish's 1950 Southern Franklin County, Ohio archaeological studies that he did as a youth when the Grove City area was rural. I'm going to briefly introduce Dick and his work, and then we'll, turn the floor over to him because he can obviously more eloquently and completely discuss his work than I can. Okay, doing the advance, and maybe we do the advance over.
All right, we should just be to.
The click didn't.
Should be able to just.
Or do it on here on the
just
mouse.
One
not
down.
the,
Yeah, one click down on the mouse.
Okay, and the mouse, not the. Thank you, Beth. Thank you. And here indeed is a picture of Dick McClish standing right beside me, doing field work as a geologist in southern Kentucky. Dick continues to be a very active in archaeological research. Besides the work that he did in Franklin County, he's done important archaeological work also in Pickaway County and Fairfield County, in Washington County, also in Morgan County, and much of his collection he's donated to the Clark May Museum, and we have all of his stuff from these various counties in Ohio very well provenienced, as well as southern Kentucky on exhibit. And there we clicked it one down. Anyway, for those of us that aren't familiar, the yellow star shows where Dick did his southern Franklin County, Ohio work in the 1950s. And you can see the Columbus metro area is the big blob in the center of the screen, and the area outlined in yellow on the west bank of the Saddle River in what's now the southwest part of the metro area. That's where Dick did his wonderful survey work in the 1950s. Okay, and again, this is the same area showing the Saddle River going north and south through the center of the screen with some of his more important localities that he himself will discuss in a moment. And lastly, for my part, Dick's localities are in black. However, there are some very other important famous archaeological resources in the area. To the north on the east bank, we have the early late woodland Saddle Trail school site where Ray Bobby, Martha Otto, and Bill Dancy have done important work. The Rodney Hopewell Mound on South Parsons Avenue that yielded an extended male skeleton with 3 large rectangular copper breastplates. The large Hartman Farms north area that was extremely rich in artifacts, now a gravel pit, and the famous Stringtown late archaic lancelate site that produced many dozens of late archaic lancelate points. And lastly, I want to mention Brent Eberhard's farm area, where Brent from the Ohio Historic Preservation Office now, but when he was a youth, he did extensive work on his farm that was immediately to the north of the McClish farm. And I think it's time for me to, and this one just shows the McClish survey with the Brent survey just adjacent to each other. So put together a very fine and wonderful archaeological database. And it's time for me to step aside for the real Mr. McClish here.
Oh, that's all. Can you read that? I don't want to repeat it. Okay. Well, our farm was on a highland above.
Oh, Dick, we got to get to the microphone here.
Oh, there's a microphone here.
Yes, there's a microphone in the
Oh, I had no idea.
your computer. Thank you, Dick.
Speak up a little too.
Ah, there, it's on wheels. We can get away from the cord.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
better.
There, that's better. That's better.
Okay. You see what I wrote here? Well, our farm was on a high area, about 20 to 30 feet above a valley. And our farm included all that. And if you'd have noticed the connection with Brent Eberhardt's, he was also on that higher spot up there. And so when I was probably, my father had been finding artifacts earlier, and when I was about 12, he's had them all laid out, and I immediately got fascinated with that. And so I started, when we would plow in the fall, in the spring, in the winter, that was all weathered down. You could go out in our fields and there were just artifacts everywhere. So I started collecting them when I was probably 13 or 14 or 15, and I was finding so many. I got so excited about what I was going to find. You know, I would have trouble going to sleep at night just thinking about it. So the next day I would go out and I started going to all the other fields around us, and I numbered those fields so that when I collected pieces, I would label them with India ink, you know, on each piece where I found it, and number field number 5, field number 10. Let's see, what am I sort of be talking about? I became a member of, oh yeah. So while I was doing that, of course, there were other people like Ernie Good who were collecting all around the area, and they collected on our field farm. And my father tried to get them to stay off so we could find stuff. But who knows what Ernie Good found on our place, because I don't think he labeled. But anyway, he introduced me to the Ohio Archaeological Association Society, and I became a member. And I started meeting people from, you know, the older guys from all university professors, and they became sort of my mentors technically. And so anyway, I put together my collection as it says here, and entered the Ohio State Fair in 1954. And I won first prize in the state, which was great. There's a Polaroid picture of that, it says here. Yeah. Oh, it's on display. Okay, so my brother had a Polaroid camera, and I took Polaroid shots, early Polaroid. Okay, about 1955. So I connected east of the farm.
Let's talk about your American aggregates work there.
Oh, is that it?
Yes, your American aggregates.
Okay. So about 1955, a friend and I were exploring. We would explore the entire region. We actually waded across the side of a river, and my family ran the dairy at Hartman Farm then, and I would go over there. And so I was over there on the Hartman Farm, but anyway, so we went further afield in the American aggregate site, which you can't see here. Can we get to that?
Oh, do you know how to advance them?
No.
Actually, I tell you what,
What?
I'll advance the slides.
No, that's a good idea.
I will advance the. Am I blocking the screen?
Wait,
Good. Yeah, let me
okay,
advance the,
well, that's.
and of
no,
course that
we're not there.
shows
Okay.
the location of
Yeah,
the farm,
yeah, that's our.
the
farm.
topo and a little bit coming
Yeah.
in.
Okay.
But
well-
anyway,
Well, okay.
and there are the anyway.
So,
Yes.
so I got excited about documenting where everything came from. To me, it was the essence of artifacts was where you found them, you know. Now, what I'm sort of shocked about is when I meet people today, adults who are collecting seriously, and they only want to find perfect things. And I ask them, where did you find that? And they said, well, about here, you know, they have no idea. Sometimes they can't even tell you which county they found that in. See, so, but I never was like that. I always wanted to know exactly where it was. So I numbered all the fields.
The microphone. Dick.
Microphone.
Yes, the microphone, Dick.
So I numbered all the fields, as you see, and number one, can you see number one? All right, well, that number one was where that was sort of what I consider to be a village site, because every time we would walk across there, I'd find 8 or 10 pieces. And I'm talking about piece would be a piece that had been worked, anything at all that was probably archaeologic, and including banner stones and grooved axes and all kinds of things. And I numbered that, and that's number one. Okay, number two was right behind our house, behind our orchard, and I found some spectacular pieces in there, axes, but fine worked needlepoint pieces, and so on and so on. And across the river, the road was a lake, a glacial lake, and that has got to be a major archaeological site. It's occupied by the Southwest Conservation Club today, and they were stocking the lake with fish, and so they've molested all the property, and you can't even get in there.
But I think the interesting thing, Dick, is how old were you when you drew that map?
I was about 14.
Yes.
I did that. So the reason it's in such terrible shape is that I, you know, I got my degree and got married and went to New Orleans, and I left everything behind, and my father moved everything to one of his outbuildings, and that's when it got in that condition. But I found it when I came back from Arabia. Oh, anyway. So what's this?
It shows how your farm changed now that it became totally urban. Yes. With your
Okay.
sites marked on it.
Yeah, it's hard to tell from a Google Earth because that was all just open country. But then these gravel pits across the road, I found major
There we're
pieces
coming
in
to.
there. Yeah. So
And
that,
of course, how the folks at the Archaeological Society of Ohio helped you get
yeah,
started with mettering, and
that's
you
1955.
just were talking about your neighbor that helped in Grove City, Ernie and Dorothy Good.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and
Well,
there
that-
we go.
That's my collection that I entered in the Ohio State Fair. That's a good deal of it right there.
Back in 1954, correct?
Yeah.
Back in 1954. And
Oh, that's just a panel I have of stuff. There's that banner stone. It's unfinished banner stone, and I found that at field number 1, and parts of slate, you know, and
there we
yeah.
ah
Oh, here's Eric
Speaking of
Olson. Here's Eric
Dr.
Olson.
Dolan here and his good project that Dick cooperated with in a large way.
Yeah, that's Eric Olson working on some digitizing some stuff. He came to my house with Andrew. Yeah. And they worked for a week or so doing that while they were preoccupied with whether they were going to survive doing Gary Augenbright stuff for a month or two or a year or two or whatever it was.
Both Dick and Gary have been very supportive of professional archaeologists and in their work. Yes, very supportive. And your gravel pit. Your gravel pit.
Well, this photo, if you can see the curve of the Sauter River, was very significant archaeologically. But when I was there, my friend and I were exploring this region about 1955 or 6. And we walked across that vast expanse. It was when they were stripping all the topsoil to sell, to put in new buildings in Columbus. And I'm sure that there were parts of human bodies and being people finding in their front yards in Columbus, okay? Because I did later on. But anyway, we walked across that and we were standing there and we saw, a human face looking at us out of the gravel. But anyway, we started walking across there and the levee along the river was very high. So we got up there and we looked across this. Oh, it was probably 200 acres. And we saw black spots all over. So we went to each one and they were where there had been fire sites and stuff like that. And we,
oops, wrong way. There.
We found all kinds of things. We found artifacts of all kinds and pottery, whole pieces, pottery. And so that one was one of the bigger ones. And so we glued together, this was many more parts than you see in this picture. And we glued that together. And that's when Ray Bobby was working across the river over at the Sauter Trail School. And we pieced it all together. And I knew Ray from the meetings at the Ohio Archaeological Society up at on the 15th and High. Yeah. And I knew him very well. So I called him. I said, I have something to show you. I went up there. So we had a large pizza box, okay, like that. We had that all laid out in there. So we went over there and we laid it out for Ray. And
get the microphone there.
Don't forget the microphone.
The microphone.
I'll remember that. So we laid that out for him, and he said, "Who put that together?" And we said, "Well, we did. These kids, And he said, "What?" And he obviously didn't believe us, but we did. So then so I said, "Well, this is right across the river from you, over there." So, and I went over to that site and I took photographs. I have photographs of his excavation at the time, and they're in the museum now. So these are just various parts. And so Jeb put all these photographs together. That's why he knows them so well. So this is the handle off of the butt and more of the broken bone and all kinds of stuff, charcoal, all kinds of things. There could be more work. And I've kept all that together all these years, okay, which was not easy since I traveled all over the world. And I got a job with Chevron in New Orleans and left this at the farm and toured, Arabia and Egypt and all that stuff while I worked for Arabian American Oil in exploration. So I left it all behind, but every so often I'd go home, and if the fields had been plowed, I would look for more stuff, and I found a few things later on. But anyway, the other fields around us, like the Falter farm, the Falter packing, they had a big, beautiful farm that's turned into a park now. But I found some pieces there, and over at Breckenridge, I found some of those sites. I found a lot of large axes and celts and things like that. Yeah, that's just one of them. A variety.
And I think it's very interesting, Dick, that in your large assemblage where you intensively collected over many years, kept everything, very, very few unifacial end scrapers or scrapers of any kind, even though so much other bite faces, unifaces, chippage, but very, very surprisingly enough, very, very few scrapers like that.
That's one of many grooved axes, probably 30 of them. And these axes are it's different than a small arrowhead or something like that. But I cultivating corn, and we had an Alice Chalmers WD,
The
very
microphone there. We won't let you get away from the microphone. No, sir.
We're gonna have to do something about that. Yeah, so you'd be plowing along, cultivating corn, and you cultivate corn, you're going up here, the next time you're over the next row. So you're driving along and you're looking down to make sure you don't miss anything. So hit the clutch, jump off, pick up an axe, get back in. And that's the way it was, So that's where the big things, How do you go backward?
Oh, there.
Here,
Don't know how to get rid of
previous right there.
thing there. I'm sorry. There.
Previous.
Go back. Yep, there you go.
There.
So anyway, this is a very large pestle my father found before in the 30s, and it's about that big, the biggest thing I've seen ever there. So anyway, that was nice. Okay, this is an unfinished banner stone that you can still see where they were working on, and then they broke it off. And he doesn't have the picture here, but on the other side, it's drilled about halfway through. So that was one of the better later finds. So this is a ungrooved axe. This thing is very finely worked. The edge is very sharp even today, all this time. This is the things that were really great to find. Anyway, another piece. Now these bladelets, that lake across the river, the road from us, huh? Yeah.
5 minutes, Dick.
What?
5 minutes left.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm not looking at it. Anyway, these bladelets, I was over there one day and they had just plowed this field, and I found a whole stack of these bladelets with scrapers and all kinds of things. And later I realized that I should have taken a screen over and dug down. I might have found the core itself. I don't know. But they're very nice. They're very, very nice. And that lake has got to be a major archaeological site. But that's it.
We're going the other way. There we go.
Well, these are just over there along 104, along the river, with all these celts. And there along the river, you see the river there. And all along there, that was a major site. all the way up. More axes. A core. And Lightheart was another site that is now in the heart of Grove City, with a massive farm, all kinds of things there. Now that's myself and my wife, and we're both 85 years old. So my wife is a nurse, and she had a job up when they were building the Alaskan pipeline in the 60s. I met her later. My first wife died, and I met her, and we got married, and we have 6 children together. And that's us in the museum at part of our display there.
And as we give the last slide, and as we give the parting commercial, as a professional geologist that did undergraduate and postgraduate work at Ohio State and more postgraduate work at Tulane, and has experience throughout the world, he's doing a very, very wonderful job of both programming and displays in geology at the Clark May Museum. So he certainly, I mean, his contributions are also in his actual professional field more, as well as the archaeology. And thanks to all. And I see we have 2 minutes left, and I see Mr. Genetti's hand.
So I just wanted to mention that.
Oh, can you use the microphone, please, Alan?
Yeah, come on, or repeat the question.
Yes.
I just want to mention that Dick has also been very helpful volunteering at the Snake Den Mounds earthwork complex that I and Jared Burks have been working on. And we do a lot of educational activities out there together with school children and other groups, etc. So Dick's been very helpful talking about the geology of the place. And so that's very good. I wanted to mention one thing about the sand and gravel quarries. So Ohio does not regulate sand and gravel quarries with respect to archaeology. Jeff Richwine used to be the archaeologist at ODNR, which gives permits for sand and gravel quarries, and Dave Snyder and Joni know all this too. But they do not regulate. So when somebody applies for a permit to open up or expand a sand and gravel quarry, no archaeology is done. The council, back in the 1970s and 80s and at various other times, we've tried to get ODNR to change that, and they have steadfastly refused to do it. In my opinion, there is no greater threat to the archaeology in Ohio than sand and gravel quarries, especially along the major river valleys, Little Miami, Great Miami, Scioto, Hocking, Muskingum, all those river valleys. With all the expanded infrastructure that's going on now, these sand and gravel quarries are destroying many important archaeological sites. When I worked at the State Historic Preservation Office, I had collectors come to me and tell me in that American Aggregates or the Hartman North area, when they were expanding the sand and gravel quarries, that they used to go on there, they trespassed, and they collected, and they used to find human remains and Fort Ancient points and pottery, stuff like that. And there are at least 2 circular Fort Ancient village sites that were in that area that got completely destroyed by the sand and gravel quarry. I contacted the owner of the quarry when I worked at SHPO's office, talked to him about letting me go out there and look at the place. He said he wanted to have nothing to do with it because he was afraid of what Native Americans would do if they were found out that there were these kinds of village sites and their ancestors were buried on the property. So we have no regulatory control over what goes on with sand and gravel quarries.
Well, I can testify to that because when they opened up the new one just south of the Pickaway County line on 23, between 23 and the Sauter River, when they started in there, they started stripping that topsoil off. Well, I went in there, I trespassed, especially on a Sunday, And I tell you, they've stripped off, say, 2 feet. And then they had another where they stripped off 2 more feet. Well, I walked all over there, and I'm telling you, when they stripped off the 2 feet, I could walk around. I found 14, what do you call them?
Pit features?
Huh?
Pit features?
Pit features, where charcoal and all kinds of stuff. And then I went to the lower one and there were more. And I found 150 sites just on a weekend or two in that building on, so I stopped. Now, there's another site south of there, down there, that rest stop on 23. You go back and all kinds of sites back there. It just really, really bothers me that the Sauter Valley is a major archaeologic site and it's being totally destroyed. Anyway.
Our thanks to all.
Thank you so much. And I want to add from the chat that Eric Olson said that you and Gary were terrific hosts and he appreciated the work that he did with you guys. So thank you.
Who said that?
Eric Olson
Oh,
said that.
Eric, yeah.
So give us just a moment, folks. We're going to transition out. Thank you so much. So we're going to stop recording. No, he didn't. Okay. I don't know how to do this. We have to doing this. I'm gonna stop sharing, right? How do we stop sharing? I don't know how to do this. Hey, everybody. Okay, so do you need to re-download your slides?
Yeah.
Okay, the drive is open. So while we settle ourselves, our next speaker unfortunately was not able to make it today. He was Chris Begley was going to speak about some underwater work that he's been doing, but he evidently is currently on a flight home from Sicily as we speak. He got delayed and couldn't come home and couldn't even join us via Zoom. So Chris Kraska has graciously offered to put together a last-minute slide presentation telling us some about his recent work in underwater archaeology in the Great Lakes area. So
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't,
if you come down here to actually this one right here,
Oh,
come to this one.
yeah.
And then crap, it's
That's
not
okay, I can
open.
go back to the, drive, right?
Theoretically, hold on one moment. I thought I had it open. Is there one more window down there open? Come to this window. There it is.
There it
You might
is.
want to, you can probably run it from there or you can download it either way. Yeah, and then just run it from the download right up there. And then you can share it. You know what you're doing?
I kind of know what I'm,
Woohoo, we know what we're doing. Yeah, you should just. There we go.
yay, there it is. Okay.
And then you want to share it to
Back
Zoom
to-
and I'll time you. It goes to 11, right? It's about 25 minutes.
Yeah,
All right, sharing screen, you can share yours.
okay, hopefully everybody can see it.
Then go do the slideshow here.
Yeah, I'm looking for, it sounds.
It's right up slideshow right here.
Oh, yeah,
And then start from the beginning.
thank you all.
Voila.
So as Beth said, I'm Chris Kraska. I'm the president-elect of the OAC. As Beth said, we got an email last evening that late last night that Chris Begley was not going to be able to make it. He was stuck in Sicily. So unfortunately, we're hoping he'll present at a later meeting in the future. So I sat up until sometime after 11 and just kind of threw this together. So I apologize if there's any errors or craziness in it. So it should be great. This is recent discoveries by the Cleveland Underwater Explorers. If you're not familiar with the group, it's been around since about 2003. It was founded by Dave Van Zandt in Cleveland. Dave was a member of the OAC and passed away earlier this year, unfortunately. So most recently, the tug Forest City. This is a steam tug that was built in 1875. It's a very interesting story, in particular, how it sank. Just 3 years after the tug was built, it was actually in a race with another tug called the Gregory to take the schooner Constitution under tow that was foundering on Lake Erie. And as the two tugs were racing out to the site to take the Constitution under tow, they collided, and the Gregory actually severely damaged the Forest City, which ended up sinking. All hands were rescued, so everybody survived, and the tug they attempted to salvage it, and they ended up pulling it to pieces. It was discovered a few years ago by Clue. This is a schematic that's from a similar tug, so you can kind of see the layout. She's about 65, 68 feet long. Sorry, 69.2. A good sized boat. We dove her earlier this year. This is the side scan sonar image that was gotten. You can see her stern is pretty broken up where they actually attempted to tow her, and her prop is kind of pulled out. Some of the stern, the transom, and other bits are scattered behind her. We actually dove her twice. Where's the video? Did the video not download? Evidently the video didn't download. Oh well. Let me see, maybe I can go back to it. There it is. Try this again. Very odd. Like, I'm going to go back to the Google Drive real quick because it's kind of interesting. So let me do that.
You have to reshare it though.
Oh, you're right, I do. Okay, let me try that. So let me stop the share and reshare.
You can probably share it from the Google thing. I think we got a bandwidth to do it.
Okay.
We love technical difficulties.
Please pardon us. Oh, we have technical difficulties. All right.
There it goes.
I don't have permission to play that file. Don't you hate that? All right. We'll skip the video, I guess. Basically, the video shows, sorry, I didn't think about this earlier, giving permission to show the file. So basically, the video shows some of the features of the wreck, including part of the steam boiler, some of the piping that travels across from the steam boiler to the back, and a big brass whistle that does somehow avoided incrustation, probably because it's made of brass. Yeah, sorry. Most of the rest of the wreck is, I'm going back. Yeah. Most of the rest of the wreck is covered in zebra mussels, as everything is on Lake Erie, except for the horizontal portions and the steam whistle rather. Okay. All right. So that's the Forest City. She lies at about 68 feet down. We're planning on doing a survey of the wreck later in next season. So go to the next slide. So the steamer Euphrates, this is a wreck that was actually discovered late last year. It's a new style boat that was built for passenger and cargo travel on Lake Erie. She was launched in 1862, very early in the year, and sadly sank just a couple months later in May of 1862. She had a cargo of grain and flour. She struck a sandbar in Sandusky and became a total loss. So we thought previously that she had been heavily salvaged. She probably was, and we hadn't really been looking for her, but Tom Kowalczyk and a couple other people from Clue discovered the wreck last year. And this is an image of what we believe to be the remnants of the steamer Euphrates. There's not a whole lot, as you can see. A lot of it's buried in the silt, but there are still some features that we thought were diagnostic and possibly from the Euphrates. Here's another wreck that Clue has been looking at. This is the Ellen White. She's a two-masted schooner, a scow schooner, excuse me. A scow schooner is kind of like a low budget schooner. She has a squared bow, a squared stern, a shallow draft, so she can get into shallow harbors, get easier access to places to load and unload her cargo. Pretty beamy, as you can see, 103 feet long with a 25-foot beam, so she's a big boat. She actually caught fire and burned to the waterline in September of 1870. And there was 5 crew, the captain and his wife. They all managed to survive and escape in a lifeboat. And strangely or fortuitously, a lot of the rigging, the sails, and the lines from the boat were kind of floating at the surface. They didn't really burn. Inspection of the wreck at this point has found out that a lot of the boat burned to the water line. There's not a whole lot left of her. A lot of her is sunk down in the silt. So we plan on looking into that as well. She's in a very shallow depth, so very easy to investigate, as a lot of the wrecks around the islands are. This is a really bad low resolution image of her tiller, which is there, and you can see part of the railing. Most of the railing did burn. this particular section, and the control handle on the tiller are still there. All right, so one of the things that Dave had started to do just prior to his death was collaboration with Mary and Larry Howard. They've been investigating different possible wreck sites in Lake Erie, from the Port of Erie, Conneaut, and also Geneva for many, many years. They've discovered over 30 wrecks, a bunch of which they've been unable to identify. So the purpose of the Larry and Mary Howard shipwreck project, they basically turned all of their documents, all of their research, all of their images over to Clue. And so we've been kind of starting, it was only in its inception when Dave passed away, to look at a lot of these wrecks that are around these areas. In August, we actually began to look at 4 targets. The first one was something that we thought could have been related to the Marquette and Bessemer number 2, which, if you're not familiar with it, was a rail ferry that used to go, I believe there's also a car ferry at one point too, that used to go from Ohio all the way up to Ontario. She disappeared in a storm in December of 1909, and she has not been found, which is pretty unusual for the size of the vessel, as you can see. Speculation is that due to her open transom design for the ingress and egress of the vehicles, that she took on water, probably in following seas, and foundered and sank. It's considered one of the biggest mysteries in Lake Erie, just because, like I said, her size is so big that we would have thought that she'd have been easily found by now. But there's a theory out there that perhaps there was a minor earthquake, or not so minor, that caused her to settle further into the silt on the bottom, and that may be preventing her location to date. So what we looked at was what we thought might have been railroad cars on the left. We dove on them last year, and at first we thought that, like I said, they were railroad cars, but upon closer investigation, even though the visibility was terrible that day, we determined that they were probably newer construction, used for construction material deposition or dumping, and probably were brought out on the lake and dumped at some point. They had modern I-beams and modern construction that you wouldn't associate with railroad cars from 1909. The Bessemer and Lake Erie Railroad Company diagram on the right kind of shows the path of the M&B number 2 and the other ferries that went back and forth from Ontario to Ohio. So she's out there somewhere. Oh, I'm going to be early here. So this is the last wreck that Dave Van Zandt dove on. I was with him when we dove on June 1st of this year. And this particular wreck was the first one of the season. It was June 1st. It was the first target he wanted to go to. We got out there. This came up on the side scan. It's obviously a sizable boat, probably in excess of 100 feet, mid to late 19th century, judging by what little you can see, lying in about 68 feet of water. Dave went down on the wreck and he didn't come up. So that was the last thing that he dove this year when he passed away. So unfortunately, I'm going to finish a little bit early, but I did want to read this in memoriam that we have for Dave Van Zandt. Thanks, Al, for providing it. We meant to send out an email earlier in the season, but somehow it got lost in the works. But this is, Dave was, like I said, a member of the OAC for some time. It's with a heavy heart that we share the passing of OAC Council member Dave Van Zandt, RPA. Dave was a fixture in the Northeast Ohio scuba diving community for many years, and the organization he founded, Cleveland Underwater Explorers, or CLUE, has discovered and identified numerous shipwrecks since its founding 23 years ago. Dave earned a degree in nuclear engineering with a minor in rocket propulsion at Purdue University. After graduation, he embarked on a trajectory of technical innovation at NASA Marshall Space Flight Center, where he contributed significantly to the advanced propulsion branch. Notably, he assumed the helm of the High Energy Laser Propulsion Laboratory, overseeing groundbreaking advancements in laser propulsion technologies. Transitioning to Phillips Electric Energy Resources, Dave's expertise found new avenues of expression in projects of national and international significance. His journey continued at Zen Technologies, where he rose to the position of senior principal engineer. Over 3 decades, his pioneering work in space flight hardware design and operation garnered widespread recognition. His contributions spanned diverse platforms from sounding rockets to the ISS, earning him accolades such as NASA's prestigious Silver Snoopy Award for exceptional performance and flight safety. Most recently, Dave was named Distinguished Engineer at Holt Murphy Advisors, leading to groundbreaking advancements in technical arenas, from electric motor design for DuPont to offshore wind farm development. Dave was always fascinated by maritime investigation of historic shipwrecks, and it was in furtherance of this pursuit that in 2009, he earned his master's in maritime archaeology from Flinders. Some of the shipwrecks discovered and identified by Dave include the Anthony Wayne, the Argo, the Cortland, the Craftsman, the Dundee, the Ivanhoe, the Sarah Sheldon, the Sultan, and the Plymouth. He was also involved in the efforts to gain NRHP recognition for several Lake Erie shipwrecks. In 2016, CLUE was recognized along with the Maritime Archaeological Survey Team with a State Historic Preservation Award for the Sultan Shipwreck Mooring Buoy and Archaeological Project in Lake Erie. Dave was a member of the OAC, the Association of Great Lakes Maritime History, the Great Lakes Historical Society, and the Society for Historical Archaeology. He was also a fellow of the Explorers Club in 2008. Dave is survived by his wife and 2 daughters and will be dearly missed by them as well as his many friends and associates. That's all I got.
Repeat the question.
Sure. Yep. Yes, Al.
Chris, can you address the regulatory regime of underwater threats in Lake Erie, for instance? You need a permit to go and dive. Can you collect off the shipwreck?
So that falls under the Historic Shipwreck Preservation Act of 1986. Linda, if I get anything wrong, you'll correct me. And essentially to dive, no, you can dive any of the wrecks that are on Lake Erie. And I don't believe there are any military or war grave wrecks that I know of. To take anything off of any shipwreck, you would need permits that would not be easy to obtain. You'd have to have reasons. For instance, Dave got a permit along with the GLHS to take the bell from the Cortland wreck. And that was for multiple reasons. Number one, you want to take things like that off because someone else will. There are still people who are looking for curios and things to put in their garage or their mantelpiece. Obviously, that was big in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Not so much now, but it's still a possibility. So that's one of the reasons that something like a bell would be removed from a ship.
So who owns the shipwrecks on the Lake Erie?
The state of Ohio. I got them both right. Anybody else? No? Okay, thanks, guys.
We have just a few minutes. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for stepping in, Chris, when our presenter was not able to. So we have about 10 minutes. If you'd like to take a break right now, get some coffee, use the restroom. If you're online, I'm just going to turn off the mic and feed for a moment, and we will come back right at 11 o'clock for our final paper of the morning, which will be Ben Ford, who traveled here for us today. So thank you. So yeah, about 10 minutes. I'm going to stop sharing. Mute. start the sound. We are back. Are we back live? If someone's got the feed up. All right, we are back at this. Our final presentation is Ben Ford, who's come all the way from Pennsylvania. Thank you so much to talk to us today. And we'll be engaging in the afternoon session as well. So we'll wrap this up and then we'll talk options and then we'll talk about this afternoon. But without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Ben Ford. If you walk around this way, you won't trip.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can start the slideshow.
Thanks. So I'm at IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which is a very poorly named state school in Western Pennsylvania outside of Pittsburgh. But I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. Went to UC from undergrad. So I'm glad to be back in Ohio. I did not realize I was following Chris, but I also want to dedicate this talk to David Van Zandt. Knew Dave for a long time. He was an excellent colleague and a really good friend. He was a damned rocket scientist. If you didn't catch that in his bio, he was legit rocket scientist. And so he brought like a whole other level to the archaeology of the Great Lakes in terms of asking really good questions and also just a level of enthusiasm that you don't always get from people who've been doing this for a long time. So I miss him. So with that in mind, what I'm going to talk about today is just sort of cover a couple of projects we've done in the last 5 or 10 years up until this past summer, and kind of cover the other part, the east of what Chris talked about, basically. So some eastern Lake Erie stuff and then some Lake Ontario stuff. There's a little bit of context on this. I always throw this up on the screen when I talk about shipwrecks because shipwrecks are important touchdowns for folks. They encapsulate a ton of history and emotion. They were there's historic events that are tied to shipwrecks in terms of like the first of things or big things that show up in the news. They're also, they represent a bygone era for a lot of folks. Like people have this romanticism around sailing ships because they've never been on a sailing ship. They suck. But they've been, they have this idea behind them at least. And for a lot of folks, they represent technological advancements. And so there's a lot that we can get out of them. And a lot of these things too, often it's a good way to talk about hubris, because I take a real small boat with myself. I'm from Southern Ohio. It's small water down there. And usually some retired dude named Tim and a couple of students. And I parked that small boat on top of a really big ship that had professional sailors on it that sank right there. Right. And so this humans versus nature sort of tension is also encapsulated in one of these things. And so it's a great way to talk to people about history and science and the environment and kind of tie various things together. I also like this kind of map because it shows all these shipwrecks as little points, and they're points in space, they're points in time. But for me, it's the connecting the dots between the ships, right? Because a lot of these things sank, and as Chris talked about, people survive these shipwrecks, and they get on another ship, and that ship sinks. So there's actually connections between the dots of the crews and the captains. Many of these dots are connected because they were owned by the same company. And if you start connecting those dots, you see that some companies were way more dangerous to work for than others. And then importantly, there's also connections from the shore through the ships to other places, right? They were carrying cargoes and people from point A to point B when they went down. And so there's a whole web that bleeds inland too. So even for people who don't do underwater archaeology, don't care about shipwrecks, there's some cool stuff here that we can pull out. And so those linkages between the ships in the history, but also between now, right? Because these are ships that built fortunes, brought immigrants, helped build communities and move commodities. And so I think there's connections to today as well. So with that in mind, I'm just going to run through a couple of these things. The first one is up on Oneida Lake. So I'm cheating just a little bit. It's not actually a Great Lake shipwreck, but these types of boats ran all over the Great Lakes. And so the Durham boat is basically the 18-wheeler of the 18th and 19th century. It's about a 60-foot boat, about 10 feet wide, maybe 3 feet deep. And the idea was you could put 20 tons of cargo in these things and run in a foot or two of water. So they're great for moving cargo around. They're way too big to portage them, but they can run on unimproved rivers. And so they basically built the economies of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ontario, et cetera. They're initially on the Delaware River at a place called Durham, which had a really early, pretty good sized iron furnace. But they're all up and down the Delaware. They move up into the Mohawk River, up into the St. Lawrence. by the 1820s, there's some dude in Green Bay building these things, who moved over there. So they're kind of throughout the area. And you can see them on the slide here. There's a couple of them being towed by an early steamship right outside of Kingston, Ontario. That's the fort in the background. Top left is on the Mohawk River, one on the Delaware River. The bottom one's actually how I got into this, because that's War of 1812 at Sackett's Harbor. And I was talking about the ships in the back. And somebody pointed out this little ship and this little boat in the front, which is a Durham boat sailing across in front. So they were kind of all over the place. And they're an inland water boat, but they run on the Great Lakes. They're also the first canal boat in the area. If you look at A on there, that's a Durham boat. And so when they're just starting to build canals in this region, they're building them for these Durham boats. And so Pennsylvania and New York in the early 1800s, their economies are defined by canals, and these are the boats that start those canals. Okay? They get involved in this too. So when Washington runs across the Delaware and then comes back to attack Trenton, both ways they're using Durham boats. Because these are boats that are designed to carry big cargoes, so lots of people and horses, and land on unimproved harbors. So you run them up on the shore, so they're with a landing vessel. And there was a shit ton of them on the Delaware River, so it was super easy to get them. And so these are the boats he uses for that. Okay, they're important. Right, they build the economy. They're important, used in important events, all that good stuff. But until a couple of years ago, we had no idea what they actually looked like. We have a couple of pictures. This is a bad picture of one. This is an allegory. But the other drawings are decent drawings of them, but they're all from the waterline up. We don't really have much about. We had never seen one archaeologically until this guy named Tim Kaza, who's a shipwreck hunter, approached me and said, I think I found one of these things that you mentioned sort of in passing. And he did. So the middle image up there is his initial side scan sonar image of it. You can see the little white dots, the frames sticking up basically. This is Tim on the top right recording it. And so we went out with a couple different permits from the state of New York, because New York's got a pretty significant bureaucracy, excavated portions of this and recorded it. And so you can see sort of process excavations and recording at the top there. And then also the site plan of it down below. And we didn't dig the whole thing. We just dug parts of it. And it's kind of cool. You can see, above the water line, zebra mussels out the wazoo. Below the water line, you can see tool marks. Like, it's in really good shape. It's pretty cool. But it gives you a sense of just the level of preservation down below that sediment line, where we can sort of see some stuff. Let me just kind of run through a couple of the aspects of it. The bow and stern are two different shapes. The bow on the left there has got kind of a spoon shape to it. It's designed that you can run up on a shore and not damage the boat, or you can run into rocks, because they ran into a lot of rocks. But you could basically not screw yourself up. The back is almost vertical. The stern post is almost vertical, and that would have kept following waters from coming up in the boat with you. This metal thing on the top of it here is actually a big metal plate with a hole in it, where they could loosely attach a huge oar that stuck out the back that they would use to steer this thing, give them purchase as they're kind of moving with the current. It was also designed to be sailed. So this is the mast partner, this big honking timber here. You can see it in the drawing up here. It's pulled off to the side, probably because the mast was up when it sank and it yanked it. But it was also designed that you could drop the mast, because these were running on canals and rivers. And so there's a metal bracket, that's this thing on the back here, that you could unhinge essentially and drop that mast down to get it out of the way. So it's sort of a hybrid sort of vessel. But these are things that we hear in the descriptions, but we never actually saw how they would do it. So we're getting a good sense of what they were up to with this thing. There are some artifacts, mostly back in the stern, a wooden mallet, a stoneware jug, this kind of cool wooden scoop. And they're all kind of back here, and it's probably like a little cubby under the deck. What I think is really cool, actually, there's a bunch of barrel pieces back here, so staves and heads and stuff. And this scoop was actually down, kind of mixed in with the barrels, implying that it was in a barrel, and if the barrel collapsed, it was there. The other thing we found on here that was kind of interesting are the setting poles. And so these things were designed to be pushed. You would walk along the side of them and push them up river. Sounded just miserable. All the descriptions sound just horrible. But we found the setting poles. They got, and there's long poles with this metal spike on the end. And so we can, again, kind of tie it into the descriptions that are All these, to the question earlier, all these artifacts were conserved by Lake Champlain Maritime Museum and are now stored at New York State Museum because this is all New York State property. And so that's where the artifacts are living. The thing had a cargo on it. It had about 5.25 tons of this like Dola stone here, this rock right here, which is a Salina limestone that outcrops in the southern side of Oneida Lake. It is economically useless as far as anyone can tell. It took me about 6 months to find anyone who could identify it because it's so economically useless, but there's 5+ tons sitting in the middle of this wreck. In addition, so we got that kind of stuff from it. We were also able to then reconstruct it, right? So what did it look like as built? And get the idea of the shape of it and then do some calculations on the bottom left here, the dude in the bottom left is my dad. He retired about the same time that I was doing these drawings, and he decided that he wanted to make a model of this thing. And so he made a really nice model, which was kind of a cool father-son project. But what we found from this is this is a good sized Durham, 62.5 feet long, 10 feet wide. The sides are 30 inches tall, so 2.5 feet tall. And with that, we could then calculate the capacity of it. And so it would hold about 22 tons and still have a foot of freeboard. So a foot above the water, which seemed like a safe calculation. And if you subtract the weight of the vessel plus the crew, we're getting pretty close to that 20 tons that the historical record talks about in terms of what these things could carry. We also, if we look at the cargo, and the cargo is about 5.25 tons is our estimate of that, with that cargo in it, it only drew 6 inches of water, right? So you've got 5 tons of cargo and this thing could float in 7 inches, which gives you a sense of just how efficient these were for moving big, pretty good sized cargoes in like bathtubs, essentially. And so it speaks to sort of the use of this vessel. Also create a reconstruction of it with the lines drawn, kind of gives a sense of its volumes. What really cool came out of that though, is that this is basically a long box with 2 pointy ends on it. So 2/3 of the boat is exactly the same frames, just repeated again and again and again and again. And those are literally 2 5-foot circles drawn till they touch. So somebody with 2 sticks and a piece of string and a dirt floor could draw these 2 circles and then lay out the frames on it and cut the frames to match, right? So you could build this literally in your backyard, which is probably where it was built. And so but looking at it, it looked funny when we looked at it because it had a weird curve to it, but that curve is actually the arc of a circle. It defined the edges of the frames. And again, giving us a sense of how these things were designed and built is kind of an interesting piece of this. Did a bunch of newspaper searches, could not find any record of this one being lost. The good news, he died. But the bad news is we don't know what happened. Was it scuttled? That's why there's rock in it, but it's in the middle of a lake, which is a weird place to scuttle a boat. My guess is this person had a light cargo, saw a storm coming, was like, I can beat that storm. Good wind. I'm gonna shoot across here, I'll be fine. Got about halfway across, got hit by a big wave, went down, and swam to shore because Oneida Lake's not that wide. And so it's bad news for them. They clearly misjudged their abilities in the weather, but for history, because now when we read descriptions that talk about Durham boats, we got at least one of them. They are vernacular craft. Some of the historical record does describe how they're different in different places. And so different guys are probably building them differently for different environments. So the next step is to find another one. I think there's actually one up outside of Kingston in Ontario. But because essentially back to that 18-wheeler analogy, if this is like a Mack truck, we got to find the Peterbilts now because they do look different, right? And so that's kind of the next step with this one. Sticking in the same area, but now in Lake Ontario, another kind of vernacular boat that we got is this Galoo Island scow schooner. Real quick, just boat nerd thing, just bear with me. On the Great Lakes, the harbors are shallow. They've got bars in front of them. They're hard to get in and out of. Problem with shallow ships is when the wind blows, they tend to skate on the surface of the water. So the way they got around this is what they call centerboard, which is basically a barn door that you can drop down through a waterproof trunk in the middle of the ship that gives you purchase so you can sail properly. And as you come into harbor, you haul that thing up and it lets you then go past the bar or into the canal, whatever the shallow thing you want to get into is. Okay? These are ubiquitous across the Great Lakes. Most of the center boards actually hinge at the front, so they swing down. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You hit something, they pop back up, they're easy to work. The earliest ones, prior to about 1830, are what are technically called dagger boards, but just, it doesn't really matter. They drop straight down. They're lowered up and down. So on Galoo Island, we have what appears to be a scow schooner with a dagger board, one of the straight up and down ones that was built in 1899. So kind of funky. By the way, I love this picture. That's kind of cool. It's in really, really good shape, but also in really shallow water, 12 feet of water. So you can see it from the surface on a good day. And the reason it's such good shape is it's back up in this this little like area back here, this little cove, and there's a rock reef that lines it. And this thing basically got pushed over that reef, tore the bottom out, sank, but then the prevailing winds come from this side, so the island blocks it this way, and any ice that would normally just shred this kind of thing into oblivion can't get to it easily because it's behind that rock ridge. So this is a bit of a unicorn of a shipwreck. But we started looking at this one because it's got this weird features to it. We also have a pretty good idea what it is based on the size of it, the description of its lost, and a kind of a mid-career rebuild that fits exactly the size of this one. So it's probably this vessel called the Northern Light. As Chris mentioned, it's a scow. So scows are these sort of flat-ended vessels that can pretty much go into any port anywhere. They're, again, really shallow, not the best sailors in the world, but they're really easy to move around. This particular one in 1960, built in 1899, 1916, they're loading some stone, a big storm comes up, they get blown off the island where they're loading stone, they get blown over to Galoo Island, up over that ridge, and the boat sinks in there, the crew gets to shore. There's a debate about whether or not the locals on the island helped them or not. The locals said they did, the crew said they did not. Regardless, a day later, they get picked up, they get home safe, which is good. And when we look at the history of this vessel, because we have a name, we can run the history. It's running kind of all over Eastern Lake Ontario, all the way up to Alexandria Bay, is about as far as it goes, all the way down to Oswego. And in between, it's running rock and hay and railroad ties and all kinds of stuff. This picture in the bottom left here just shows it's not the Northern Light, but it's a similar type of size vessel. They would load the bejeebus out of these things. It's stacked like 10 feet tall with hay on the deck as well as down below. These are not the safest things to be around. The other thing to point out here is that in 1916, both of these ships are on the Great Lakes at the same time, right? You got these little guys over here and these big honking monster, a couple 100-footers, also running around the same exact lakes, okay? And they're serving different markets. And we're seeing the little guys getting squeezed out and shipbuilding becoming more industrialized in this process. But the little guys are still around. There's still people building these little ships. And that's where the archaeology comes in, because there's no plans and where things get a little weird, frankly. So I already mentioned that this one has this dagger board, right? And this is just us recording it. Again, 12 feet of water, great place to train students, a lot of fun. But it's got this dagger board, which is anachronistic, so that shouldn't be there. It's about 60 or 70 years out of date. When we look at the way the thing is built, it's insane. The beams that go across, so the deck beams, are not always nailed to the frames. Sometimes they're not even close to the frames, which is not a great way to do this. And when they hit the hatches, they're just nailed to the little board that goes around the hatch. So it's like the railing of the deck. Like if you build a deck at your house, it's like you're using the railing to hold the deck up, is essentially what's going on here. There's nothing underneath to hold them up. There's no stanchions. So my initial impression of this boat is that some dude in 1899, his granddad built ships. And somebody came to him like 60 years later, and like he's like, I got this. I got it. Right. It's insane. But it lasted for 17 years. Which is above average. The average on the Great Lakes is about 15 years for a ship to make it, right? So it seemed to do okay. And so we're looking into like, is there a reason to have a dagger board? Like, is there an efficiency reason of some sort that makes sense? Haven't figured that out yet. We're also looking at the hull framing, like having no supports underneath does mean that you can move cargo around a lot easier, right? If you're loading big sticks in there or bales of hay, you got more room to move around. And then maybe they're using the cargo to hold up the deck, or maybe they're putting in temporary supports after it's loaded. So maybe, again, maybe there's some sense to this, right? So we're gonna go back probably this coming summer, do a little excavation to see if we can figure out some of these, like, is it not as crazy as it might first appear, basically, and get a better sense of this interesting little vernacular ship that's really, really well preserved. So with that, I'm gonna hop over now to this region. So just kind of east of here a little bit, well, north and east of here, and talk a little bit about a much bigger ship, right? Because like I mentioned, Northern Light is running around this period when shipbuilding is starting to industrialize. And one of the things that these bigger and bigger ships have to contend with is still that there's these shallow ports, and that if they want to get into Lake Ontario or in and out of Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, or between Superior and Huron, they got to go through some canals, right? So the Sault Ste. Marie up between Superior and Huron, or closer to here, the Welland Canal, which is documented here. And so the locks on those things are real narrow and real long. So they're basically forcing these ships to get narrower and longer over time to fit the locks. And that only works to a certain point. The Great Lakes shipbuilders know about iron and steel, but they build a lot of wooden ships because wood is cheap in this region. There's a lot of it. And so they're building these wooden ships, but the physical properties of wood indicate that around 400 feet long the ship, your buoyancy at the ends versus the middle becomes really problematic, and the thing starts to bend badly, right? So they have to figure out, as they get these ships longer and skinnier, how do they reinforce them? Okay, and so that becomes a major engineering problem for them. They do a couple different things to get at this. These are just a couple examples of some pretty good sized wooden ships that are out there around the Great Lakes. One of the things they do is they just drop huge amounts of wood down the center, and the diver gives you some sense of scale there, but that's like a 2 foot by 3 foot timber, and there's a couple of them just packed along the middle of this ship to reinforce it, right? So that's one solution. A much more elegant solution is they start building trusses and arches into the ship itself, right? So in that top right one, you can see the arch going up over top. In other places, it's circled here on the Continental, they actually build the arch into the hull of the ship, but they essentially treat it like a bridge, and they distribute weight through this arch that runs through the vessel. It also helps when you've got steam engines, which are concentrated weight somewhere. This helps distribute that way. So they're putting trusses, and they got different names for them, but basically arches and trusses. They also take and basically weave like a basket weave of iron bracing between the frames and the hull. So they basically put this, like, you can sort of see it up here in this, all this Xing is this iron bracing here that basically weaves through the hull, and again, just distributes that weight like a lattice work. So these are some ways that they go about trying to extend these things, right? And so over on outside of Erie, there's a shipwreck called the Kenobi. The Kenobi ended its career in about the 1920s, like 23, I think, right outside of Erie Harbor. It started life as a much cooler name, the Iron King, in 1887. It's 252 feet long. It's about 1,700 and change gross tons. So it's not the biggest ship out there, but it's a good sized ship. And it's again, long and narrow. It's got like a 1 to almost 7 ratio. And so when the Detroit Dry Dock Company built it, they were trying to figure out how to build it out of wood, because the wood is inexpensive, but how to make it nice and long. And so what they settled on in this case is they put several big, like 2 foot by 2 foot timbers right down the middle of it. They also layered out from the center. So here's the center line with all that, with the big timbers. These are about 1.5 foot square timbers, also just laid out along the bottom of it to reinforce it. And then they also wove into the side of it that iron bracing. So it's got that basket weave, and they're just trying to extend this thing. This one's in 15 feet of water. We did a field school, like a cultural resource management underwater field school up in Erie this past summer. So the students got to practice recording, and it's actually their drawing up top there on this wreck, because it's pretty accessible. My avocational folks up there hate this wreck because the visibility is always like that. It's shallow. It's kind of an ugly wreck. But to me, this is a great one because it's kind of that mundane thing that's in your backyard actually is a representative sample of some pretty cool processes in terms of innovation on the lakes. I'll have a quick just sidebar here. You guys are probably familiar with MAST, which is the Maritime Archaeology Survey Team out of Ohio. There is a Pennsylvania version of it called PAST. We're not super creative. We got 2 S's. And it's a kind of it's a volunteer group that's got some state support, but they are out. They're all trained to do non-contact survey. They have to go through a course to do it, and they're out recording these wrecks. So there is that component in addition to like that field school that I was describing. And then I'll end here with a little bit more of the field school. There's one more example, and this one is to go look for some submerged landscapes in Erie. It was part of that same field school. It was actually the main thrust of that field school this past summer was marine remote sensing, because that's what CRM folks need. But just a little bit of quick history here. Lake Erie, like the rest of the lakes, kind of goes up and down. It's the post-geologic history of the lakes is complicated because as the lakes go away, they're dumping water, but they're also damming things up with ice. And then the water is eroding in various places at different times, and you got acetic rebound. So pretty much all the lakes are higher and or lower than they are currently at various times in history. They're a bit of a pain to deal with, but this is just some modeling that someone else has done of it. The thing I'll draw your attention to is that in the middle of Lake Erie, kind of running from Long Point down to Presque Isle, is a big old moraine, a pretty good sized bit of high ground that would have divided the lake into 2 smaller lakes in various times in the past that were connected probably by a wetland of some sort with this sort of high ground right above, right? So I mostly do historical archaeology and that kind of stuff, but I was trained in pre-contact archaeology. My research partner, Jessie Halligan, that's her thing. And we look at this and we're like, that seems like a pretty sexy environment. We should go look at that. Plus, with the water changing so rapidly, that's actually good news. When the water comes up slow, the waves just eat stuff. When the water comes up fast, sometimes things get preserved. So with that in mind, our goal was to go out and do some survey out there. So with a bunch of students from all over the US, we ran a bunch of different survey lines, and some of these look like ass because we were just trying to get a sense of what's there, right? Like this is a much more sort of professional looking, but we had limited time. So we ran some long lines to try and see what's going on. The nutshell version is that there is submerged, buried stratigraphy in places. These are sub-bottom profiler records. The purple line is kind of showing the hard bottom, so some probably glacial or just after glacial, like scoured surface. And then this is the surface as we see it today, the mud line. There's a package on top that is probably just marine sediment, but down underneath that, you can see there's this banding, right? And it's disrupted in some places, probably by some large rocks. But we can see features in this that look like some kind of channel, like a river channel or some kind of stream channel. The way it pinches out as it comes up high, this is coming up onto the moraine. And so we're seeing it basically, the stratigraphy disappear as we get up onto the moraine. And on the moraine itself, it's scoured out. It's just hard bottom. There's not much else there. In some pockets on top of the moraine, though, there's these little pockets of sediment up there that I think it really would be a good place to go look. The difficulty here is most of this is about 70 plus feet of water, and that sediment package on top is about 10 to 15 feet in most places. So it's going to take a little bit of doing to get through that. And so our game plan is to go back in probably this summer for a short period, and hopefully more intensively in 26, and get some support, hopefully from NOAA, to actually do some bigger cores and a little bit tighter survey. And NOAA has an interest in this because there's a national marine sanctuary that's going in basically in all of Pennsylvania's Lake Erie waters, and so they have a vested interest in understanding what they're getting into and being able to promote that. So we're hoping to partner with them as we move forward, and do some more field school with it, because there's a lack of folks who are trained to do this kind of work in a CRM context, and so it's one of the things we're trying to alleviate there, which we'll actually come back to this afternoon. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I got, guys. Sorry, that was an anticlimactic ending. There we go. There we go. There we go.
I'm gonna break for lunch.
Yeah.
you guys have determined any potential age on the drone boat?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the age of the Durham boat. Yeah, so sort of circumstantial. There's a canal called the Wood Canal that opens up into Oneida Lake in like 1809, I want to say. And then the Durham boats are mostly 1700 phenomenon and then early 1800s. And so by like 1820, 1830, you don't really see them anymore because the main canals are coming online. So, my circumstantial date is between about 1810 and 1830. So let's call it 1820. Somewhere in there, probably. That stoneware jug is the only remotely diagnostic artifact, and that's not super diagnostic, unfortunately. We didn't do any, we did some wood samples to get the types of wood, because it's kind of into the bottom is oak, the sides are pine, which is again basically durable on the bottom, light on top, which is one of the things that when they were described, they mentioned that. And same way the setting pole is ash, which again we'd expect. So that we did that kind of stuff, but we didn't get any dendro dates because there's no exterior wood on anything we could get dates from. Yes, sir. They could have. They took bigger boats because that was, the reason that right. So Pittsburgh and St. Louis had this fight about where they started, right? But in both cases, they started on a big river, right? So they're starting where, Pittsburgh is 3 rivers, so it's beginning of the Ohio. And so that's a good sized river, and St. Louis gets even bigger over there. And so they were running on bigger rivers for the most part to start with. And so they had what was called a keel boat, which is it's bigger. It's got more depth and more breadth. It's and more of a bottom of rounded hull, so it's a little easier to control. And so they had those, and they had a couple of boats that they actually were broken down. Like they had these sort of prefab things that they took with them. And then once they got farther west and they realized that those rivers were they were getting toward the end of the rivers, they started picking up indigenous watercraft as they went. So yeah, that was, as far as I know, Durham boats weren't engaged with Lewis and Clark. Yeah, because I think they got into shallower and shallower water. And so if they had a Durham boat, it would have been easier probably for a while. But theirs were basically like a houseboat looking thing. So awesome. Cool. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, and watch your step and don't die. So I will just wrap this up by saying we will have about an hour-long break. We'll come back here at 12:30. If you're joining us on Zoom, remember it's a different link. You can find that link on our webpage or in the email that I sent out. So we'll start that back up at 12 and record that. And we have a couple options for lunch locally that Al is going to tell us. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we'll go from there. So hold on one second. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to end this call. We'll see you all after.